Welcome back to Pokemon Episode Summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 455, Battling the Enemy Within. The episode begins with Ash and the gang walking through a forest, with Max leading the way through the seemingly never-ending forest to the Battle Pyramid by utilizing his Pokénav. Ash was very excited to get to the Battle Pyramid, and asked Max if the Battle Pyramid really was along the path that they were currently on, since they'd been searching along the path for quite a long time. Max double-checked his Pokénav, and confirmed that they should be seeing the Battle Pyramid any second now. Ash was still a bit skeptical, but much to his delight, the top of what appeared to be a large pyramid showed up over the horizon, above the tops of trees before them. Ash wondered if that could be the Battle Pyramid, and Max confirmed that it was, as he looked at his Pokénav, which was able to identify Battle Frontier Challenge spots. Ash throws up his fist in the air in pure excitement, and suggests that they head to the Battle Pyramid immediately. May agreed, and commented on how excited Ash was, although she also reminded him how she had a grand festival coming up in the Indigo Plateau, so they had to go there after Ash won. So basically May was like, "Yo Ash, you better win as fast as possible so we can get to the Indigo Plateau," and Ash promised that he would win in almost no time flat, very confident, as he and the rest of the gang continue to walk towards the Battle Pyramid, but suddenly the ground beneath them disappears, and Ash and the gang were sent falling down into the darkness below the ground, with a whole bunch of pieces of dirt and stones that fell with them. Then see an image of the Battle Pyramid, as we then immediately after this cut to Ash and the gang eventually waking up after their long and hard fall. It felt like they fell down a bottomless pit, but there was a bottom. They had fallen somewhere underground. First, everyone made sure they were each okay, not having sustained any injuries, while May wondered how they possibly could have ended up down underground in the first place, with Max suggesting that it was probably Team Rocket's doing, since they always dug mysterious holes. However, Brock actually didn't think so this time, since they appeared to be in some sort of ruins, and Team Rocket's holes never led them to any ruins. Max, May, and Ash noticed this as they examined these ruins, as they saw a whole bunch of hieroglyphs and a whole bunch of markings of ancient Pokemon all over the walls, such as fossil Pokemon, for example. Basically, these ruins were a lot like the ruins in the second episode of the Pokemon Advance series. So maybe there was a link there? Who knows? May then noted that the ruins were pretty dark, and wondered how she and the rest of the gang could escape, since she had now confirmed, upon looking up, that there was no possible way for them to climb out of the ruins back up to the surface. Max, however, saw a light in a far-off passage in the ruins, and suggested that he and the rest of the gang go that way, since there was probably an exit wherever light was. Ash agreed, and so did Brock and May, as the four of them walked down the passageway towards the light, hoping to be able to escape. With Ash being the first one to go, followed by Max, followed by Brock, and lastly by May, who was a bit scared to walk around in the dark ruins. Meanwhile, Team Rocket had actually arrived at the now huge hole Ash and the gang fell down, because, the ground had ripped apart to create the hole, right? Team Rocket were intrigued by the hole, since they didn't dig it, and usually they were the ones digging the holes, and they all bent down to examine it, with Jesse wondering what possibly could have happened to make ground give away like that. James observed the area around the hole, trying to work out reasons for the collapse, wondering if this hole was natural or if someone dug it. Mime Jr., Wobbuffet, and Meowth inspect the hole as well, and James comes to the conclusion that since they had been trailing Ash and the gang, and Ash and the gang were nowhere to be found, they must have fell down that hole. Wobbuffet screamed its name in agreement, but it screamed its name so loud that large cracks appeared. Team Rocket realized what was happening. The hole was expanding. Jesse screamed in fear, suggesting that she and the rest of Team Rocket run away, but before they could do so, the ground was fully destroyed beneath them, and Team Rocket fell into the now bigger hole that Ash and the gang did. Team Rocket tried to save themselves from falling, but they just couldn't. Anyways, back with Ash and the gang, underground. May and Max were the first ones to point out a Pikachu statue that they passed by on a pedestal near them. Ash instantly ran over to it, of course being interested in anything having to do with Pikachu, and he remarked on how cute it was, and wanted to touch it. Max adamantly shouted at Ash, demanding that he not touch it, saying that it being ancient could make it potentially dangerous and a trap. Although Ash assured Max that everything would be fine, and there was nothing to worry about, as he picked the Pikachu statue up. However, Max's warning was fully warranted, as removing the statue from the pedestal seemed to trigger something, as the statue's eyes started to glow blue, as do the eyes of a Pikachu carving on a nearby wall. Ash realized that Max's warning was right, and was about to go put back the statue, but the door with the Pikachu engraving thing on it slid up, opening, as a huge boulder instantly started to roll down from the door, and chase Ash and the gang down a tight passageway throughout the ruins, as Ash and the gang were desperately trying to escape it, not wanting to be crushed by the ball, obviously. The terrified Ash and the gang continued to run, as the boulder inched closer and closer and closer and closer, when suddenly Ash and the gang encountered a middle-aged man, who happened to be the explorer of these ruins. The explorer instantly sees Ash and the gang being chased by the giant boulder, and calls Ash and the gang foolish kids, while Ash screams at the man to get the fuck out of his way, saying that Ash and the gang must have been able to have set off one of the traps somehow, because that was the only way he knew of the rolling ball to be able to catch up to anyone and come out of the sealed door. Regardless of the man thinking Ash and the gang were foolish kids, he does decide to help them out by sending out his good old Regirock, a legendary Pokemon that Ash and the gang had never seen before. Once Regirock was out, the man had to use a Focus Punch to destroy the boulder, saving Ash and the gang. Ash muttered that Regirock's skills were amazing, while May examined Regirock on her Pokedex, of course never having seen one before, due to being a legendary Pokemon. The man then returns Regirock to his Pokeball, and Ash remarked that not only was Regirock amazing, but the man was amazing too, and he thanks the man for saving him and his friends' lives. However, the man was not in a good mood whatsoever, as he yelled at Ash and the gang, saying his name wasn't Man, but it was fucking Brandon. And he also yelled at Ash and the gang for trespassing Forbidden Ruins, and asked them why they were in Forbidden Ruins that they weren't allowed to be in. But May revealed that they were just walking over an area above ground when the ground collapsed and brought them underground. They wanted to find a way up, but they were having trouble. Brandon forgives Ash and the gang for the trouble in this case, although he asks who touched the Pikachu statue to cause the boulder to go rolling, and Ash admitted that he did. And apologized, saying that he just kind of went crazy and really wanted to touch the Pikachu statue. Brandon gets mad at Ash for this, recognizing Ash as a Pokemon trainer, and telling him that he should be ashamed, because a trainer should be on his guard at all times and not be able to easily be taken over by a want or other emotion, such as a want to touch the statue, if it was potentially dangerous. Stating that a trainer should not make any foolish or deadly mistakes. Ash got immensely frustrated, while Brock asked what Brandon was doing in the ruins by himself, leading Brandon to explain that he was an explorer, protector, and researcher of an ancient culture which lays buried deep down underground in these ruins. A whole ancient civilization. Max piped up, putting up his hand to reveal that he had heard of some ruins about an ancient civilization once before while reading one of his research books, although he couldn't remember the name. Brandon did remember the name, though, as he addresses the ancient civilization as Pokelantis, which makes everyone shocked because it sounds like Atlantis. Your typical ancient underwater civilization. Brandon then decides to give Ash and the gang a little exposition dump about the Pokelantis civilization, which was led by an evil king, which wanted to rule the world and take over the entire world with Ho-Oh by controlling it. Obviously, Ho-Oh didn't want to be a part of ruling the world, so it rebelled against the Pokelantis civilization and destroyed their entire kingdom. However, unlike the rest of his kingdom, the king managed to escape demise and took revenge on Ho-Oh by stealing it inside of an orb-like stone Pokeball and then constructing the very tomb that he and the gang were currently standing in to seal Ho-Oh away from the world forever. So apparently, Ho-Oh was sealed away in these ruins, with the king having dug these ruins just to keep Ho-Oh there. Unbeknownst to Brandon and Ash and the gang, Team Rocket, who were down in the ruins, had overheard everything about Pokelantis and Ho-Oh that Brandon had talked about. And instantly, they wanted to find that orb that contained Ho-Oh so they could free it and use it for themselves. James remarked that having a Pokemon like Ho-Oh could really improve their chances to take other Pokemon too, and that meant that Team Rocket would get closer and closer to a promotion. And James also added that they could probably find other treasure down in the ruins. Jesse and Neil agreed, and the three of them did their usual chant, very excited for promotions from Giovanni, as they ran off in search of treasures, and especially the orb containing Ho-Oh. Back with Ash and the gang, Ash got immensely excited about the concept of seeing Ho-Oh again, and really wanted to find the orb, but Brandon did not want random-ass kids to follow him and wander around in the ruins, since it was too dangerous for random-ass kids to stay in the ruins. Although Ash argued that he was not just a random-ass kid who was playing around in the ruins, he had won 6 Battle Frontier symbols. And also, he added that he was currently about to get his 7th. He just needed to get to the Battle Pyramid. Before Brandon could say anything more about the Final Frontier symbol, which he happened to know about, Ash stormed off, dedicated to finding the Ho-Oh orb, and maybe even the Final Frontier brain, so he could get his last symbol. And Ash and the gang and Brandon followed, so as to not risk Ash potentially getting injured by himself. While running, Ash declared that he wanted to prove his strength against Ho-Oh. Meanwhile, as for Team Rocket, they had found themselves in a similar passageway that Ash and the gang were in before the huge boulder started to chase after them. Also, much like Ash, Jessie saw a statue, although this time the statue was of Smoochum, not Pikachu. But since Jessie absolutely loved Smoochum, she grabbed the statue off the pedestal it was on and started to hug it. But the Smoochum statue's eyes started to glow and triggered a door with a Smoochum engraved on it that had eyes that started to glow too, and the door slid open and revealed another large boulder, which instantly started to roll after Team Rocket, forcing them to run away from the pursuing boulder. Although they almost tripped multiple times because they were so fucking terrified. Meanwhile, back with Ash, he had made his way down a separate passage and came across a door with several strange symbols on it. He started to touch the door, trying to find a way to get it to open, hoping that the orb would be on the other side, when the door actually did open, believe it or not, but it kind of acted like one of those revolving doors you would see at like a huge department store or something, because basically he touched the door and the door spun around, spinning Ash around with it, and the door immediately shut after this. So basically, Ash was now trapped on the other side of the door. Right as Brandon, May, Max, and Brock caught up to him, it was only Ash and Pikachu on the other side of the door now. May and Max were the first to run up to the door, having seen Ash get flipped to the other side, so they pounded on the door, trying to get it to open, but they had no luck. When Brandon and Brock caught up, May asked Brandon what they should do to save Ash, leading Brandon to state that there was a mechanism to open the door that they had to find. It was very imperative that they found it, because apparently the room that Ash and Pikachu had just found themselves in was the King's Chamber, which could be very dangerous. While Brandon tries to look around for this mechanism, on the other side of the door, Ash woke up, and although it was pitch black dark at first, all of the torches in the chamber light up automatically as Ash stands up. Due to the newfound brightness in the chamber, Ash and Pikachu saw just in front of them a large statue of the king of the ancient civilization, Pokélantis, holding a scepter. Underneath the large statue was the king's former throne, and on it lied the stone orb shaped like a Pokeball. Ash picks the orb up and practically begs for there to be something inside, such as Ho-Oh, and he commands Ho-Oh to emerge if it was in the orb, as he holds it above his head. Meanwhile, Brandon had found the way to get into the room, as he pulled away a stone that was embedded into the doorway, and pressed a secret button that was unveiled when the stone was pulled away, which caused the door to open. So Brandon, Brock, May, and Max ran inside. And here Ash, continuing to try and summon Ho-Oh as he held the orb up. Brandon, Brock, May, and Max tried to stop Ash from calling out Ho-Oh, with Brandon warning Ash that it could be dangerous. But Ash started to glow as the orb started to shake, and a booming voice called out from inside of it that sounded very dark and evil as it recited an evil spell of some sort. Eventually, the light surrounding Ash became so vibrant and blinding that Brandon, Max, May, and Brock had to cover their eyes a bit, and Ash fell over before a dark aura enveloped him. That was blue and black, having come from the Pokeball, leaving Brock, May, Max, and Brandon to uncover their eyes and stare in shock as the blue and black aura goes inside him, and May asks if Ash was okay, but Ash simply just gets up and starts to laugh evilly. He had been possessed or some shit. And this dark voice had overtaken him now. Somewhere else, underground, Team Rocket had managed to escape the rolling boulder and had made their way to another doorway and were trying to decide whether to go in or not, in hopes that they wouldn't get run over by a fucking rolling boulder again. Meowth, however, spotted a keyhole in the door and volunteered to look through it. And so he did, spotting what appeared to be a creature's silhouette that had wings on it. This made Jesse and James extremely excited, believing that Ho-Oh was on the other side of the door. So they hurriedly try to open the very large doors by tugging on them, and they actually do manage to pull them open. However, Team Rocket, including Mime Jr., who James was holding, and Wobbuffet, were soon sent running away when it was revealed that it wasn't a Ho-Oh on the other side of the door, but instead a Pidgey, who angrily chased after them as punishment for Team Rocket disturbing its fun it was having in its room. Team Rocket were having immense trouble running away, though, because Pidgey was angrily pecking at them. Meanwhile, back with Ash and the gang, Brandon, Brock, Max, and May were simply staring in shock as the possessed Ash bragged about how he was finally free, and with his freedom he required power and Pokemon, and demanded that everyone give him his Pokemon. A dark aura then exhibited from Ash's body that was even stronger than before, and this dark aura tried to forcibly take Brock, May, and Brandon's Pokeballs away from them, but Brandon, May, and Brock managed to grab the Pokeballs just in time, with the help of Max too. Max, May, and Brock ask what the fuck was up with Ash, and demand to know from him why Ash was acting so different, although Ash simply asks who the fuck Ash was, saying that he was actually the king of Pokélantis, and told them to watch their mouth around him, leaving Brandon to come to the conclusion and tell the rest of the gang that Ash had been possessed by the spirit of the king of Pokélantis. As the spirit of Pokélantis goes on and on about how he would conquer the world once more, because he was the great and mighty ruler of all time. Brandon then came to the conclusion that the king of Pokélantis must have been actually sealed inside of the orb, as opposed to Ho-Oh. It's like Ho-Oh was too strong to be locked away, so it decided to lock away the king of Pokélantis as punishment, and told the king of Pokélantis' spirit that the reason why it was imprisoned was because it was evil. And Brandon also declared that, just like how Ho-Oh had defeated the king of Pokélantis, he himself would defeat the king of Pokélantis in a battle, also announcing himself as the king of the battle pyramid, which meant he was also the final frontier brain. Brock, May, and Max gasped in shock when they learned of Brandon's true identity, and Brandon declared that the battle would be king versus king, and he would prove himself as the better and stronger king. Brandon was so confident he could win against the king of Pokélantis that he made a deal with the king. If Brandon lost, then the spirit could rule the world, and the spirit could take all of Brandon's Pokemon, but if Brandon won, then the spirit would have to unpossess Ash. The spirit laughed evilly and agreed to this deal, confident that he himself could win. Meanwhile, as for Team Rocket, they had managed to escape the Pidgey and came across a dark tunnel that James identified as actually being the hole from which a door used to be located. Meowth gets excited, thinking that maybe Ho-Oh was located down this tunnel, so he calls out for Ho-Oh, yelling down the tunnel, "Hello!" And he hears his voice echo, but he also hears a roar coming from the bottom of the tunnel. So Team Rocket excitedly run down it, chanting about how they were totally going to get a promotion once they caught Ho-Oh. However, they hear a Ho-Oh roaring again. But Meowth was actually able to identify both this previous roar and the roar that just happened as actually coming from a Salamence, and this was confirmed when Team Rocket was startled when a Salamence came out around the corner of the tunnel and fired a flamethrower at Team Rocket, sending them running out of the tunnel in fear, not wanting to get hurt. Meanwhile, Brandon was now escorting the possessed Ash and May, Max, and Brock to the battle pyramid, where they were all surprised to see Scott there waiting for them, and Scott immediately greeted everybody. Also, as for how Brandon and Ash and the gang even got out of the fucking underground area, well, Brandon knew his way up, I guess. Anyways, Scott tells Brandon that Ash was one tough opponent, assuming that Ash was still in control of his own body, and was about to have a genuine battle with Brandon. Although Brandon retorts back that even if Ash was his normal self, he would easily be able to beat a regular-ass kid. Scott was confused by this, and simply just told Ash to give it his all against Brandon in his final frontier battle, but Ash, still under the possession of the king, responded that he had no clue what Scott was even talking about regarding the battle pyramid and the battle frontier and all that shit, and declared that no one would stand in his way, no one was strong enough to beat him, pushing Scott aside as he walked into the battle pyramid to the battle stadium, leaving Scott immensely confused as to what was up with Ash. Leading May to simply explain that Ash wasn't himself right now, and Brandon, Scott, Brock, May, and Max all go inside the battle pyramid, where May explained further about the whole situation with Ash being possessed and all that by the ancient spirit of Pokélantis, immensely shocking Scott. Brock then asked Scott for some information on Brandon, because he usually had information on any of the frontier brains, and specifically, Brock said he wanted to know how Brandon knew a lot about ancient shit, like ancient ruins and the king of Pokélantis and all that, with Scott explaining that Brandon divides his time on doing research on Pokemon and ruins, and also being a frontier brain. And Scott, Max, May, and Brock took their seats on a bench as they looked at the battlefield, where Ash, possessed by the king of Pokélantis, was on one side, and Brandon was on the other side. And Brandon's referee, that was in the middle of the stadium, announced that the battle was going to begin right away, leading Scott to wonder what Ash, even while he was possessed, could have up his sleeve to challenge Brandon. Brandon's referee officially introduced himself as Samuel, and stated that the battle would be a one-on-one battle, with no time limit. Samuel then introduces formally both trainers, but when he introduced Ash first, the king who was possessing him got immensely angry at Samuel and clarified that he wasn't Ash, he was instead the great king of Pokélantis. This shocked the referee, but he continued his announcements, introducing Brandon as the king of the battle pyramid, and officially declaring it was time for the battle to begin, as Brandon sent out his Regirock. While May, Max, Brock, and Scott were worried because the dark aura was really overtaking Ash at this point. The king got a little frustrated, wondering how he could possibly win, since he had no idea about Ash's Pokemon and strengths. Meanwhile, we then see inside Ash's mind, where Ash's consciousness had actually kind of awoken. This was because the spirit needed Ash's consciousness so that Ash could send out the appropriate Pokemon, since Ash knew his Pokemon better than the spirit did, obviously. Ash probably wouldn't have helped the king if he knew he was possessed, but Ash didn't even know he was possessed. He genuinely thought that the battle was right in front of him, and he was just challenging Brandon regularly. So, seeing Regirock, he decided that Sceptile would probably be the best choice for the battle, since Sceptile was one of his strongest Pokemon, and he wanted to have it battle a legendary. The king could hear Ash's thoughts and sent out Sceptile in real life, as Samuel officially started the battle between Regirock and Sceptile. Throughout the whole battle, Ash called for the attacks, and the king executed them in real life. So, when Ash ordered Sceptile to use Leaf Blade, the king did this in real life, but Regirock used Iron Defense to fully protect itself from the Leaf Blade. Brock, May, and Max, having seen Ash choose to send out Sceptile, came to the conclusion that that must have been Ash's decision, not the king's, and Ash must have still been inside somewhere, which they were correct about. Anyways, the king angrily accused Brandon of trying to hide away from his attack by using defensive moves, and ordered Sceptile to use another offensive move, Bullet Seed, although Regirock just defended itself again, using an Iron Defense to completely nullify the attack. Scott, Brock, May, and Max all get worried, and they see the king become even more angry and exhibit an even darker aura. And Sceptile even gets scared too. But regardless, the king eventually looks up onto the ceiling and sees a chance to gain an advantage, so he orders Sceptile to use Bullet Seed on the ceiling, which shocks Sceptile and Ash's friends, wondering why the fuck the king would be doing something like this. But the king simply repeated the Bullet Seed on the ceiling order to Sceptile, and Sceptile technically had no choice to do so, since it still kind of thought that Ash was in charge somehow, so it fired off a Bullet Seed, which hit the ceiling, and sent several large pieces of the ceiling falling from it, and straight onto Regirock. Brandon doesn't look worried whatsoever, as he simply just has his Regirock use an Iron Defense to protect itself from getting damaged by all the falling shit, but even though Regirock wasn't really damaged, it still got trapped and buried. As for Scott, Brock, May, and Max, they were all immensely shocked that Ash would attack like this, and started to doubt if maybe Ash wasn't even inside after all, because he would never attack in such a rude manner. While the king just laughs evilly, thinking he already had the battle in the bag because Regirock was trapped, Brandon simply clarified that he was not done yet, and called the king a coward for the tactic that he just used, agreeing with the gang that Ash would never attack like the way he just attacked, even from the short amount of time that he knew Ash. Ash manages to hear what Brandon was saying, and hearing the insult of him making a bad tactic made the darkness dissipate for a little bit, and made the spirit's control over Ash dissipate for a little bit. Ash actually regained control of his body and denied that he would ever do a cowardly attack. But soon, he lost control to the king, once again, right as May, Max, Brock, and Brandon were about to cheer that Ash was back. It seemed they were being too quick to cheer. The king then laughs and says that it would take a lot more for Ash to break out of the king's possession, which worried Max, May, and Brock, and Max remarked that Regirock was still trapped in the rocks and thought that maybe Ash, as the king, actually would win the battle. However, Scott reassures Max, saying that Brandon was strong, and Brandon and Regirock had gone through tougher situations than this, and still won, so Max didn't have to worry at all. Sure enough, Regirock uses its immense power to burst out from beneath the rubble and rocks and, just the shift in the ceiling that fell on it, and once Regirock was free, Brandon ordered it to use Hyper Beam. The king cursed, frustrated that Regirock had broke free, and much to Scott, Brock, May, Max, Brandon, and even Sceptile's shock, the king ordered Sceptile to grab the referee and use him as a shield. Especially the referee, Samuel, was shocked by this. He didn't want to be used as a human shield. Thankfully, Sceptile, actually having a moral compass, hesitated, because it wasn't used to Ash ordering such mean and dirty tricks, but once the king angrily told Sceptile to do as it was told, Sceptile realized it had no choice, and went towards Samuel to hide behind it. Samuel was terrified and pleaded with Brandon to stop the attack from Regirock so Sceptile wouldn't have to use him as cover, and Brandon obliged, telling Regirock to stop the Hyper Beam attack. However, this gave the king a chance to attack, as he ordered Sceptile to use Leaf Blade on Regirock, which sent Regirock flying into the ground. Sceptile followed up with a second Leaf Blade straight to Regirock's leg, severely injuring it, forcing Regirock to now kneel down. So the king's spirit taunts Brandon, saying that now that Regirock was kneeling, there was no way Brandon could win. However, Brandon had another strategy, as he ordered his Regirock to focus and use Lock-On, which confused May because she didn't know what Lock-On did, but Max explained that it essentially specifically targeted a Pokemon, so attacks could do more damage. And sure enough, the Lock-On targeted Sceptile to make any of Regirock's incoming attacks more powerful. However, before Regirock could actually get an attack off, the king quickly ordered Sceptile to use another Leaf Blade on the other leg, essentially rendering Regirock immobile, because he couldn't use either of its legs. Brandon didn't panic for long though, because he just had Regirock use a Hyper Beam on Sceptile, although the king just laughed, saying that Regirock would be too slow to hit Sceptile, as he ordered Sceptile to quickly dodge, going way faster than the slow-ass Regirock because of it being immobile. But what the king didn't realize was that, according to Scott, Max, and Brock, Lock-On also forced an attack to hit with 100% accuracy, including Hyper Beam. So, when Regirock used a Hyper Beam, staying where it was, it hit Sceptile square in the back, with no problem, and the force of the Hyper Beam sent Sceptile falling to the ground and knocked out, as Samuel officially declared that Sceptile was unable to battle, and that Brandon was the winner. Scott, May, Max, and Brock were all shocked by the pure power of Regirock, while the king, who was previously very confident that he could win, refused to admit defeat, and shouted at Samuel, saying that his call was wrong, and the battle actually wasn't over. And the king then turned towards Pikachu and demanded that Pikachu battle in Sceptile's place now. Pikachu looked worried at Ash's behavior, or rather the king's behavior, and didn't want to battle under the king. And thankfully, May, Max, and Brock all ran in front of Pikachu in order to protect it from the king, saying that the battle was actually over. And they try and tell Ash to break through from the king and try and extinguish the king's spirit. Inside, Ash could hear May, Max, and Brock, and he really wanted to break free, but he couldn't. He didn't know what to do, and he cried out for help from his friends, but unfortunately, before Ash could actually have himself heard by his friends, the spirit regained control and ordered Pikachu to use Thunderbolt on Regirock, but Pikachu refused. Though deep down, he wondered if he really should use Thunderbolt, just in case the real Ash did want him to use it, and he just couldn't clarify. Inside Ash's mind, Ash wondered what was going on, as everyone was shouting his name, basically trying to get him to come to his senses and fight the king. He was wondering what was going on because he was actually starting to gain more of the self-conscious again, and he got an idea. Right as the king demanded that Pikachu use motherfucking Thunderbolt, not on Regirock, but on Brandon, May, Max, and Brock, to deal with them and stop their interruptions. Though Brandon reminded Pikachu that May, Max, and Brock were his good friends, and Ash put his idea into action, breaking through from the king, telling Pikachu to use Thunderbolt on him. And Pikachu was a bit hesitant, not wanting to hurt Ash, but he did so, hoping that it would deal with the king, and sure enough, it did. Because the electricity really hurt the king and essentially forced him to jump out of Ash, and the darkness of the king's spirit went floating up into the air, freeing Ash from possession. And Ash wasn't even hurt at all, because it was the king that felt the pain, since he was basically the one conscious, not Ash. Brandon saw that now that the king was free, he could banish the king, and he proceeded to reveal that he kept the Pokeball orb thing somehow. He must have grabbed it when he went into the king's chamber, and he proceeded to say a reversal spell, which was, light come forth from the dark and return to the dark, dark come forth from the light and return to the dark, and this makes the orb glow, and trap the king's spirit inside of the orb, just like how it was originally, dealing with the spirit for good, hopefully. With Ash back to normal, his friends, Max, May, Brock, and Pikachu, and Scott, were all relieved as they come to Ash and welcome him back. Scott then congratulated Brandon on being able to capture the evil spirit again, but Brandon clarified that Ash's friends did most of the work. Brandon was the one who trapped the spirit, but Ash's friends were the reason why the spirit was unleashed from Ash in the first place. Meanwhile, as for Team Rocket, they were still underground in the ruins, and they came across yet another door. And they found another door right beside it, which actually led them to find out that these two doors were actually one big sliding wall. And since they'd been looking so long for a hole or just any treasure at all, they decided to take their chance, even if another Salamence would come out. And they pushed the sliding wall to find out that all the other side contained was a mere Hoot Hoot, leading Jessie to throw a rock in anger and disappointment. But the rock happened to hit the Hoot Hoot, which angered it. And Hoot only became even angrier when Jesse called it a useless Pokemon, and it started to chase after and peck Team Rocket as they hurriedly ran away, not wanting to get pecked anymore. Since they were so focused on running, though, they stepped on a booby-trapped floor tile that springs Team Rocket up, flying out of the ruins to the surface, but also into the sky, blasting off, much to Team Rocket's frustration. Meanwhile, back with Ash again, Scott, and Brandon, they were all outside the battle pyramid, as Ash was thanking May, Max, and Brock for everything they did to help him while he was possessed, and help freeing him and all that. Although, Brandon tells Ash that he better feel lucky that he had friends, because without them, there was no way he could have gotten fully free, and scolded Ash, saying that the spirit possessed Ash because he was reckless and arrogant, and if he was more careful, then maybe he wouldn't have been possessed. Ash admitted, while putting his head down, that he may have been a foolish child, and he may have been reckless and arrogant, everything that Brandon had said, but regardless, he still wanted to challenge Brandon in an official, fair and square battle, not one where he was possessed. Though Brandon replied that he would only fight Ash once he became stronger, suggesting that he train harder and dedicate himself even more to bonding with his Pokemon. Ash begged for another battle, but just as Brandon was about to reply, Samuel, his referee, came up to him and asked him to come with him to finish off the moving preparations, as it was time to go on another expedition. Brandon obliged and clarified that the next time he and Ash did battle, they would be battling in a different location, while Scott explained that the battle pyramid could literally move, and that's why it was always at a different location, with Scott confirming that it was not unusual for Brandon to be moving places, since he was an explorer at heart, and he needed to constantly be on the move to explore new shit. Brandon confirms that he indeed had some more exploring to do, particularly some more ruins to visit, but promised Ash that he would get in touch when Ash was strong enough, somehow, and advised Ash to train hard until their battle. With that, Brandon and Samuel entered the battle pyramid, and Scott advised Ash and the gang to stand back as the pyramid's corners slide outward and dust begins to be kicked up, and the pyramid lifts off into the sky on rotors that keep it there, allowing Brandon to go to the next ruin site while riding the pyramid with Samuel. Ash and the gang were amazed at the battle pyramid's flight capabilities, while Ash promised Brandon, while watching the pyramid fly off, that he would train hard for the battle, and be sure to come back stronger. Just then, May was the first one to notice something else in the sky, a large glowing golden bird. And the rest of the group turned their attention to it, with Ash recognizing it as none other than Ho-Oh, and also recognizing that it was the same sight that he saw when he first started out on his journey, minus the rainbow. But this made him realize that, essentially, he had seen Ho-Oh at the start of his journey, and he didn't even realize that it was Ho-Oh at the time. And Pikachu recognized it as well, having seen it, obviously. Seeing Ho-Oh gave Ash motivation to continue to train for his official battle with Brandon. And it also gave May inspiration to get ready for her upcoming Grand Festival in the Indigo Plateau, and she reminded Ash that they should probably head there now, until Brandon returned, and Ash agreed. With that, Ash and the gang said goodbye to Scott, and continued on their journey to the Grand Festival in the Indigo Plateau, with May immensely hyped to participate.